Okay, so welcome to Flexbox. Don't worry, it's not too bad. I'm sure you've all read that a couple of times already, though. So it really isn't that bad. It's pretty darn cool. It's a new way of laying out items on a page, and it doesn't have a lot of the drawbacks that tables do or floats do. Or I guess there's something else called grid that's still being developed. It's kind of like where Flexbox was like 6 years ago currently, and it probably will be better for like less dynamic stuff or just basic page layout. But right now, only I think Edge and IE11 support it, so who cares?
Grid or
Called Grid.
grid is better for what?
For static alignment on a page, perhaps. For grid-based things, because you don't have to hack in anything. It's like a Bootstrap type grid, just kind of there. Except in the classes, or in the style, you're defining like what fraction of the container it should take up. So. But Flexbox does all that and more, so it's pretty sweet. Like I said, it's direction agnostic, so you can lay things out horizontally or vertically, starting at the top, starting at the bottom, starting at the left, starting at the right. It doesn't matter. There's ways to make it do pretty much whatever you want. Despite all this, it's pretty predictable. There are some goofy things, though. There's some weird concepts. One of them is called flex basis, and it still doesn't always make perfect sense to me, but it's not too bad. So what can Flexbox do? Let's just go through all of it. The first thing it can do that's kind of neat is it can center something vertically without using a table. That's really hard to do normally. It's kind of a huge pain in the ass. You either have to use JavaScript and calculate the viewport and then do an offset or whatever, and that sucks. With this, so the red box, this is going to be something that's going to continue through the demo. So the red box is the container, the yellow box is an item inside there. I keep calling them parents and children. I found out in a lot of documentation they start calling them flex containers and flex items. So flex item is a child, flex container is a parent, same thing basically. So on the parent, you would just put display flex. So that is just like display block or display inline, except there's a new one called display flex, and everything inside of it will obey flex rules. There's also inline-flex, and that'll mean that the container itself lacks an inline element, but everything inside it will obey flex stuff. So this is like block flex, just block style by default.
Block versus inline block.
Yeah, versus inline block.
So inline flex, the flex container, flex parent, put everything inside of it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. Okay. Just for two different, styles of the box model or whatever that is, the layout model. Default layout model. So the most important further properties that we get used to are flex direction. This determines the main axis. So this determines just how it's going to basically be working. Column means it's going to be arranging things vertically. Justify content. This defines where in that vertical column it's going to start placing things. So right now I have center. And if I were to add items to this, it would just keep stacking them underneath lonely item, but then taking that and centering those two items and then centering them. There's a few other options, and I'll go through those in a minute. So
Well, that's like the most
basically it on
annoying
this
thing in
one.
the world solved right there.
Yes, exactly. And the cool thing is that this is agnostic. So if you can figure out how to do it direction agnostic, so if you can figure out how to do it horizontally, then you can figure out how to do it vertically, starting at the bottom or whatever. It's nice. They didn't bake in a bunch of constraints like.
So vertical
tables
centering
have.
is not possible too.
Yes, and which is what this is. Yeah, you can do vertical and horizontal centering by having a horizontally flexed container, and then inside that, the flex item is actually another flex container that's vertically centered. So then any page, responsive, centered directly in the middle of the page. It's really good for like those landing pages, like
Login pages.
login pages. Boom, centering a login box, easy. Centering text on a big splash page for those, new hipstery pages, not necessarily parallax pages, but just, hey, here's my project and some dumb blurred image behind it, that kind of thing.
And again,
Very easy to do.
Outside container, vertical, flex, and then inside container, horizontal, and then an item inside that.
And an item inside that, yep.
Okay.
And the item can just be anything. It doesn't have to be a block or an inline element. It'll still lay them out according to flex. If you were to have inline elements inside of a flex item that's like a div or something, then they would be inline, which is really cool because so if you have you could just have H2s or whatever, and they would all align, or you could have paragraph elements and they would all align. So it's pretty nice. It's pretty darn nice. Let's go on. So just like I was saying, if you add more items, it'll center those items vertically as well. So this is just the same one before, but with 2 more items. So this one we're changing something on the children. So this is this is where it gets the name Flex. Things can change shape and size to fill their container, which is extremely useful. There's a property called Flex Grow that I'm using here. And Flex Grow determines whether or not it can be 0 or it can be a unitless value. So if you set Flex Grow to 0, it's not going to grow any bigger than its content inside of it. So just like backup page, these just fill their items. They're not growing. By default, they have a Flex Grow by default is 0, so they won't grow. So in this, they're grow 1. And what happens is all the spare space taken that is in that div, so if we go back, all this red space, it's going to be divided equally and dispersed between the 3 items. So, except the div's now taller because the page is taller, but whatever. So, and that's basically it. Flex Grow is awesome. Now, it's a unitless value. If you set all of them to, all of the items have an identical Flex Grow value, then they're all going to flex the same amount. Now, if I were to increase item 2's Flex Grow value, it would grow more than the others, and then you can think of it as like a ratio between all of them.
2 would be half, and then 1.
Yeah, it's kind of half. It takes the spare space, and it'll give it twice as much of that spare space
Okay.
in relation to all the rest having an equal amount. So it's not really. It's
You do like a 1.5.
you can do it's unitless and it's float. So yep.
Nice.
So, is
So
anybody
here's exactly that. Here I'm doing Flex Grow 2 on the second item, but the rest of them just have Flex Grow 1. So you can see the second one's expanded.
with all this talk of expansion and growing, there's so many things I want to say. And
So,
You can it's unitless and you can go as high as you want.
It grows without-
You can grow to 11. There's also shrinkage, which is very much in line with the growth stuff. Shrink is cool because if you tell an item to Flex Grow like 10,000, and you've got a bunch of items in there and you're not telling them to wrap, which is something I'll get to later, then it's going to actually try to shrink any items that have a shrink of 1. So, or higher. Any shrink that's greater than 0. So shrink 0 just says, under no circumstances are you going to shrink this item. So it might cause this div to overflow. It might cause some other things. So a lot of times you want to set shrink to 0 just so you don't end up encroaching on that. Because we're in the Flexbox model now, things can change. And it can force your div to be even smaller than it normally is if you set things up that way. Flex Grow 0 is the default, and Flex Shrink 1 is actually the default. I a lot of time change Flex Shrink to 0, but we'll see why. We'll see why we want to do that here in just a second. Like I said down here, forbids shrinking the div smaller than its content height. This Flex Grow forbids stretching it more than its content height. That's the basic idea. So here now we're moving into horizontally. All I did here between the very first demo and this one is we changed the flex direction to row, which changes the main axis to be horizontal. And since it's row and not row reverse, it's also saying we're going from left to right. There's also column dash reverse, and that means we're going from bottom to top, which might be useful for some things, especially for like just display elements, not necessarily text and stuff. If you wanted to make like a loading bar or some sort of status bar that's stacked up from the bottom, depending on a certain amount of items, then you could have it, flex direction, column reverse. Then for each increment in your like a level bar or loading bar, you would just add an item in there until you reach the top, something like that. So this one is just an item sitting in a big div. It actually happens to be inheriting the stretch, align item stretch, but I'll get to that in a second. That's why it's really tall and filling the whole div. That's another stretch thing. So basically the same as the centered horizontally one. So now I'm just adding a couple more, and you can see it centers around the center along the main axis, which is now horizontal. Okay, now for the other justify content things, I was using center before because that's just a good one to get things going and show you that vertically aligning center is very easy, but you can use flex start. Flex start is just left to right, or what it really is starting at the base of the main axis. So if it's horizontal, if it's just row, it means flex start is on the left. If it's row reverse, flex start would be on the right-hand side, going the other way. So you can also slam things to flex end. It'll still lay them out left to right, but it'll then take everything it laid out, slam it to the right. Which is handy. There's also space around. This is a great one. This is just a really nice one for making things are spaced out. It's kind of like automatic gutters dependent on content width. So it's really nice. There's also space between, which is very similar, but now it slams them to the right and just lets the gaps sit in the center.
That's your real
I think I actually use that.
Yeah. I'm going to start using tons of these because it's so supported. And there's a polyfill going back to Internet Explorer 6. So I'm such an over.
So this is native CSS. This isn't.
This is just CSS. Yep. This is, yeah, these are just CSS. Yeah, all the stuff you see over here is just CSS. I'm doing all of this with CSS. So now I'm wrapping. So you can tell things to wrap or not wrap. The default is no wrap. There's also wrap reverse. And like I said, have fun misspelling wrap warp. That's extremely common if you're a dummy like me. So in this case, we're doing flex start as our justify content. So it's going to start laying things out left to right, starting on the left-hand side. And you can see item 12 is too big to fit in that space. So it starts a new row, starts laying them out again. This is really nice, I think. And all you have to do is tell it to wrap. You could do wrap reverse, and what that would do is it would just make it wrap from the right. It would just slam everything to the right-hand side, but still lay the things out in the same order that you see here.
But that would be flex end. I thought.
Oh, you're right. That's flex end. Wrap reverse does the exact opposite of what I just said. It wraps to a row above and then a row above. And at the time that I made this, I wasn't sure why this would be useful, but where it's useful is if you're doing things in columns. You might want your columns to wrap from, starts in a, does one column and then to the right it makes a new column and starts doing another column. But you may want to go the other way for some reason. Makes more sense that they would be.
So this is reverse.
This is wrapped reverse. Notice how the first row of items is in the bottom, and then item 12 comes in the HTML after item 1, but it still shows on the page before it, because once it gets to the end, it just wraps above and above and above. I don't know why you'd use this for horizontal stuff, but you might. Might be useful somewhere.
It would just maybe, I don't know, you could use it for JavaScript sorting or something if you had a flex class or.
Oh yeah, I'll get to Nito sorting stuff in a second too. So here it is, just with no wrap on the basically the same thing I had before, and you can see it just kind of squeezes them all in together, just no matter what. And this is where they all have flex shrink of 1, so this means that it'll just keep slamming them in here and crunching up, kind of like. I call this the Chrome tab effect or whatever, when you just, eventually they're just little tabs that have absolutely no information in them. So, should have made that a demo, damn it. So here's aligning items. So align items applies to what's called the cross axis. The cross axis is just perpendicular to your main axis. So in this case, flex directions row. So we're laying things out horizontally. But align items is actually affecting how things will be placed inside the parent container vertically. So flex start means it's going to be slammed to the top. Flex end would mean slammed to the bottom. Center would mean they're centered. So with one fell swoop, you can do horizontal and vertical centering. So it's kind of nice. But then as you start adding items, they'll do kind of whatever you told it to do. So here, slamming it to the bottom, centering, and then stretch. This is my favorite one. Stretch just makes it fill the parent container, which is kind of difficult sometimes, and you don't have to do any fancy comparison stuff in this one to get it to work. So something like a nav bar. You got a bunch of items in there, and you just want to make sure they all, maybe put a right border on them so it would have a divider, just like in my nav bar up here, or whatever the header bar is up there. But then if your text size is a little smaller, like in my second one, and then the right border would be shorter, stretch just makes it fill the div, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So again, align items. We're showing how it's going to arrange things on the vertical axis, and there's something called baseline, and baseline's awesome. It picks the baseline for the first line of text. Baseline is something that's determined. You can look it up on the Mozilla developer crap how it's determined. But if it's a text item, it's going to be the baseline of the first line of text. So notice I have multiple lines of text in item 2, but everything still aligns with that first line of text. So I could have variable ones, but they would all line up right at that first line. I think that's super cool. That's really useful. It's kind of magical.
Okay.
What am I doing here? I'm wrapping rows and aligning content. So in this one, I'm wrapping them just kind of the normal way. Flex start, and so I got align items. I'm aligning them vertically, and then I'm also have something called align content. So align content only matters if you're wrapping stuff. And what it is saying is, what do I do with all the spare space in this div when I wrap? Should the next row go all the way to the bottom? Should the next row kind of go to the center, and then we'll sort of space things out? That's what's going on here, and the next one should make more sense. So now we have align content flex end. So what it's doing with the spare space is just slamming it all to the end. What it's doing is space around, so it spaces them around like that. So that's what it's doing with the spare vertical space when wrapping. Basically, align content only matters when you're wrapping. Here's space between, same idea as when we're justifying content. And then, do I do a center? Nope, I didn't do a center, but there's center as well. There's also stretch, and stretch is super nice because this is kind of like masonry in a way. So now you can be guaranteed that it'll always fill the parent div vertically, even though we're laying things out horizontally. This is super nice. So if you got, say you had constant height content, or if you wanted your content to appear constant height, you could do this, wrap as many rows as you want in a parent container. You don't have to write separate rows as, div row like you do in Bootstrap. It'll just start a new row when it needs to. Just really handy. Oh yeah, I took align items off because align items doesn't matter nearly as much when you're wrapping. But here I put it back on and I moved it to center. So center was the one I didn't cover. It does what you would think. It centers everything when wrapping. Only matters when wrapping. If there isn't more than one row, align content is ignored. So we also get to do order, which is crazy. So there's just from CSS, there's just order, colon, and integer. And in a flex container, that'll define the order as displayed here. So you see HTML position 1, 5, 3, 4, 2. That's the actual written out, and then on each one I've placed a inline style of order. So now with JavaScript, I could go in and say set this one's order to something else. Here, can I actually do that from here?
So it counts how it's actually written. So if you got 5 divs, it assigns those numbers, and then
Let's take a look.
whenever I'd love to see how that actually works.
So
Okay.
here's my parent div. I got display flex
You can hit
correction.
Command plus to zoom in on the. Just click in the. Yep.
Yeah, baby. All right. So there we go. So you can see the parent container. It's got all the stuff that it needs, and then I just have order. 1, 5, 3, 4, 2. But you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's how they actually run around the page. And then you could change these at any moment. Like I can make it -1 just to make sure it slams it to the front there. And then of course I would probably want to update this so it actually makes some sense. But whatever, you guys get the idea, right? -1. Whoops, not HTML position. Whatever I meant to do there. Order is now -1 on that one.
Is there an example here where you can have one of those at a different height? Is it going to do a masonry grid, or is it going to do like a float?
I'll show you, but in this case, I'm wrapping and in this case I'm stretching. So their height doesn't really matter. Their height doesn't factor in. In Internet Explorer, there's some issues where you have like a minimum height on something. It like freaks out. But on this one, their height, there's no explicit height set.
It'll stretch to the height of the.
It'll stretch to the height of the div. Now the reason these are all stretching is because I put flex stretch on this gray div, this gray parent, and it's kind of doing it to everything. So this column over here is stretching just like these are if there were 2 in a parent container. This whole thing's built with flex. So it's just inheriting that stretch thing. If there hadn't been stretch on it, these would be in a really thin, 2 thin rows slammed to the top. Let's move on. Okay, so we were putting aligned content on, and that was aligning things vertically, even though we were laying things out horizontally. We were putting that on the parent, and it was just, okay, all the children are going to align to the top of this thing. You can override that. So in this case, I have align item center, and so that would have all the items just sitting right in the center of the page. But what I've done is align self. So on that first one, oh, really? Accidentally, I took this off, but I'm just redefining align item center again, just for that item. But then on the second item, I'm putting align self flex start. That's just a way of overriding what the parent had defined for all the children, which is handy sometimes. I don't know, if you got like one outlier that you want to slam to the bottom, you can do that. So if you always want to have like a close button up in the upper right, but everything's centered, it would work for something like that. There's probably better ways of doing specifically that example, though. Let's move on. Like I said before, there's a main axis and a cross axis, and there are certain properties that apply to them. The main axis is the row or column idea, so if it's a row, it's horizontal, if a column is vertical. Cross axis is just perpendicular to that axis. All of these work along the main axis, justify content, so that's the centered space between flex start, flex end. So for row, that's horizontally where all that's going to be placed. Flex grow works along the main axis, so if we're laying things out horizontally and we have flex grow turned on, things are going to fill that parent div's width, like a row, and then decide what it's going to do based on that. Flex shrinks also along that axis. And then flex basis, which is a confusing spacing property, also works along the main axis, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But what flex basis really is it's defining what the actual size of that box is, size of that content is, that flex item is, according to the Flexbox model. By default, it's whatever box sizing is. So you know the box sizing property in CSS? By default, it's set to content box, which means the actual text or whatever inside your div. Bootstrap changes it to border box, which is much more sane. So that includes any border that you put on your div, but not the margin, which kind of sucks. There really needs to be one more that includes the margin. They'll probably change that someday. Let me stop confusing you ahead of time.
I understand what you're saying. So basis is just saying.
Yeah, basis is like, okay, I think this item is. Yeah, I think this item is this big. What do I do with the extra spare space or whatever? So it helps the flex determine how much to flex. The ones that work on the cross-axis are align items, align content, and align self. So align items was just saying, you know, how we're going to center these things vertically. Align content is when we wrap it, how are we going to align the rows themselves. And align self is saying on each item, I'm going to override align items and do my own damn thing. Wow, isn't it great? All right, let's see some actual stuff going on here. So this is masonry for constant width, and this is a type of masonry that ends up with mortises or whatever you want to call those at the bottom. And I have this page randomly regenerating, so you can see how, because all these items, I think I actually have, I also have flex grow 1 on the flex items in here. So that they, no, I don't, never mind, this is flex column. And this is just what happens when it arranges them on here, which is pretty sweet. All these items just don't have any flex properties set. It's just flex, column, and wrap, and you get something like this, which is pretty nice.
What's being randomized?
Laravel Blade is randomizing how many items, and I think it's doing width. I think, yeah, this is for constant width items.
So does a masonry grid for you?
Exactly. This is free masonry goods for constant width. It gets a little crazy when you want to masonry completely fill a box. But that's really the only thing that matters is how you're going to decide what to do with your content inside. I'll show you that in just 2 more steps.
Now, that's masonry, it's done column. Can you do the same thing with rows?
Yep. Here's one for rows. So, of course, your gaps are going to show up on the right. But it's the same exact thing. So
could you set it up to kind of look like the previous one a little bit, but it would fill the whole width?
Yeah,
so
I'll show you.
Okay.
I'll show you on this next one. So the only thing that's different here is flex direction is set to row instead of column. I think I'll run the exact same randomizing crapola. So on this one, I just set flex grow to 1 on the children, and in this case, I'm laying them out in a row. You could lay them out on the column, but here I've got a bunch of random stuff. I tried to actually make some fake content in here, so I'm getting some fake stuff from a faker library that's amazing for Laravel. Everybody should use this because it creates the most hilarious little slogans like diverse asynchronous capability or organized multimedia infomediaries.
I've used that before. It's
And also awesome company names like Gerlach, Troy, and Weber. So. But in this case, so it's laying them out in a row and it's flex growing them along the row, and I'm wrapping. So it's going to fill the horizontal width every time, depending on how much spare space there is for each one of these. And then it's also going to, so even on the last row, if it's got a couple odd items, boom, those are going to expand way out. So that might be what you want to do. It might not be what you want to do for that last row. What there isn't for Flexbox is expand all but my last row. There's no pseudo selectors for alternating rows. That's something that I haven't seen anybody solve yet. So you're not going to get that kind of behavior. You're not going to get every nth row make it gray kind of stuff, which I think kind of sucks. That's one of the biggest drawbacks for this kind of thing. But for this sort of stuff, it works great. If you got a lot of like elements, you just want to slam them all onto a page and make them perfectly fit together like this, or seem to perfectly fit together, because it's, you know, I'm changing some of the content width inside based on its parent, but I have a maximum on this one because I just like, well, it doesn't look good when it's super wide and stupid looking. So, but that's how you do it. It's not much CSS at all. 4 lines. Yeah, pretty nice and simple. Anybody needs help implementing this stuff, just ask me. I've gotten okay at this, I guess. Here's just another demo. You can, yeah. So when you hover over this, you get a nice animation. And these, except it doesn't look nice on the Chromecast, but these animate nicely normally.
It's the stupid.
It's a screen cap or something or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's the latest in the Chromecast.
Oh, okay, cool. So this is really pretty easy to do. You can.
Is it on there on that screen too?
It is kind of slow on the screen.
Oh, maybe it is this.
Maybe it is. It's smooth on my machine, but we'll see. Battery's getting close, so it's probably throttled down.
Is it red?
No, it's not red, but it's
It starts at throttle.
20% probably. Yeah.
Your CPU usage. Yeah.
So this is just an on hover, and what it's doing is it's changing the flex grow value. So it's not an on hover, it's a CSS hover. So flex grow is just 1 for all of these normally. And I also have a flex basis, but you don't need to worry about that. That doesn't mean anything yet, and it doesn't really affect how this works. But I got all these dumb, stupid colors up here, and you can just, it's just, I don't know, just trying to do something that graphic designers sometimes do and make things look pretty. I don't know. But so let's see. So these color boxes all have a class of color. So each one of those has a class of color, and they start off with a flex grow of 1. And then when you hover, it just expands the flex grow to 3 so that they expand. And then I have, you can see I have transition all. It could have been transition flex dash grow 0.5 seconds, and it would just transition that one property.
You can plug in so you
Oh, I get it. Cool. I don't die. I'm a real smart guy when it comes to this sort of stuff. And I'm also doing a couple other stupid transitions because I don't normally do this stuff, but it's really simple. This stuff's easy because I did it. So there you go. But this could work for other types of accordions, and of course you could do this vertically just as easy as I did this horizontally. So I don't know, maybe you got an on-click on something and you just slap a flex grow and it's a left-hand menu nav thing and something like that. So, and then you could unhide some items underneath it, just like I'm unhiding them here. So I'm just doing that with a display. Oh, opacity. Bunch of boring actual markup there. Move on to the next one. So you can also do really weird goofball layouts, as I call this one. So on all of these, so I got my keyboard. I have keyboard rows because I wanted to keep the rows specifically separated, so I'm not doing wrapping. And then I have each key has a class of this keyboard key. Normally they all start with a flex grow 1, flex basis 0 pixels. Really all this is saying is they all have the exact same flex basis. And when I say flex grow 2, that item is going to be twice as big as the other items or whatever. So you can see over here for the backspace key, I have a flex grow of 2.5, and that's what makes the backspace key look big up here. So, and I also made it so that they all light up when I click on it, which is impressively hard to do. I wasted way too much time doing this, but this is a fun thing to do. So, oh wait, it doesn't show up on it. Oh yeah, it does. It doesn't catch all of them, which is funny. Works pretty good. Ooh, look at your fancy keyboard that actually you can press down a bunch of keys at the same time.
Wait, how are you clicking?
It's like 9.
Oh, they're like, each one is like...
Each one's mapped,
I
yeah.
don't want to brag my keyboard and keyboard all over. Go on.
That was weird, like the screen dimmed. Isn't that weird? See that? The whole
This
screen's
is the
dimming.
TV itself.
Wow, it's so
Yeah. It's 'cause
active.
of bleeding.
Ah,
If there's more white on the screen, it's going to bleed out.
interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. So, and there's nothing else special going on here. I just set some special flex grows. Just, I was just tweaking them to percentage points just to make, like, spacebar has a giant one. That's pretty nice just for, like, tweaking things to exactly how you want. And it is responsive. Oh, can I show that? Fudge.
Is it? Yeah, you can squeeze the... What's going on?
And I need to, like, refresh, I think. What? They even have the font sizes changing based on... you can do font size based on view, VH, and VW. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sweet.
I wanted to use that one time, and Mike was like, no, that's progressive. I don't want to use that.
I said, no, it doesn't work for Chrome, or it doesn't work for the in-app browser.
Ah, right, yeah.
And
Like I said, he was like, oh, that's progressive.
That's not gonna work. All right, so I recreated the Bootstrap grid. What did I not? Oh yeah, this is the entire Bootstrap grid. This is a non-responsive version because I don't have the media queries in there. But I put the media queries in a code pen. It's really easy. You just wrap another one of these. So I did the vanilla CSS you see on the left, I mean. But this is the entirety on the let me go on a tiny little bit on the right. That is everything you need to do.
Can you zoom it out so we can see?
Am I zoomed in still? Yeah.
Well, just so we can see all the CSS at once.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you can see how, like, the other one goes on forever because it's got a for loop in there and it's going through all the, all 12 columns.
That's...
But for doing, so what this gives you is flex column, 1 through 12, and flex offset 1 through 11, because you don't need 12. And it's really frickin' simple.
That's Blade, isn't it? That's not actually... Is that Sass or is that Blade?
Oh, you're right. This is... No. Oh, wait. Which one did I do? I think I left the Blade in there. Damn it.
Way to go!
I have the Sass out there on CodePen as well. So, if you want that. Except I have it in SCSS because it's... No, this looks like a mixture. I think this is. Because I don't have an end for each. I have brackets. And I have this shit, which this is absolutely
Oh, I didn't know you could
SCSS.
I didn't know you could do for...
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's why perhaps Sass is better than Less, because Less doesn't have for loops. Well, Less does have for loops. Less is missing a couple of control structures that Sass does have.
Yeah.
And this might be one of them. Look how easy it is for me to just replicate 12
it's
things.
easier to do loops in Sass.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Because in this, look how easy it was here. And that generates all 12 of those flex call dash integers. Which is handy dandy. And then you get this, which is the Bootstrap grid. You have to set you have to set box sizing to border box on everything in there. All the parent containers. Because otherwise, it'll size it based on the content, and then it'll push things around because of the margin and padding. Yeah, it doesn't work right. And you can't have any margins on any of these items either, or it'll screw it up, just like with Bootstrap. So, just like if you ever had like 2 call 6s in there, and then you put a margin left on the right one, and notice it got shoved down a whole row, that's why. Because we don't have box sizing margin box, which is what we need. If we had that, then we could do everything we ever wanted.
Who makes
more.
these standards anyways?
Whoever that W3C folks are.
Bill Gates.
W3Cs who formalized Flexbox and stuff, and CSS3 and all that fun stuff.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation
Oh, yeah.
for Cascading Style Sheets.
Exactly. It's that and
I wonder what these standards people are
Well,
smoking.
they only John
Yeah, I know.
CSS.
Yeah, especially with some of the initial
Do
ones
one
that were
thing well.
Yeah.
like specifically for left to right layouts. All slammed in the top left
You're doing too
corner.
many things, Bill.
Yeah.
Like table was a slight improvement, but then really locked down too. It was another big mistake.
I'd really like to know if people are smoking because I want some because it's apparently really good stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to smoke as we can do this stuff that dumb, but
I don't know, but I'm drinking the Kool-Aid.
yeah. And you can see I did nested grid. I didn't add any extra crap in here in the CSS to make nested work. I just nested it because it does stuff based on the parent div. So
That's awesome.
it's pretty cool. And I'm using Flex Basis here to do this stuff, by the way. Let me explain how that works. So what I'm saying is Flex Grow, no. Flex Shrink, no. On all these items because I want them to remain rock solid, but laid out in the way that Flex can lay things out, which in this case is really just left to right, but whatever. Flex Basis says you're going to assume every object is 8.333%, which is 1/12 of the width of the parent container. And that just makes it all fit really friggin' nice.
So don't grow, stay solid.
Don't grow, stay solid, and don't shrink either. That's always a bad idea. Shrinking actually is usually a bad idea in Flexbox because you'll usually just encroach on stuff that you want. I don't know why it's the default is to have shrink on. Default shrinkage. This is just a positioning workout, and it kind of demonstrates the main and cross-axis stuff. So for the first three, all the main axis should stay the same, and the only thing that'll change is the align items, or justify content should not change, and align items should, justify content should, not change. Align items should change. So flex start, that's top left. Flex start center, that's center left. Flex start, flex end. Hey, it's supposed to be flex end. God damn it. I thought I was being really meticulous here. That should be bottom left. So then center, flex start, yada, yada, yada. I'm just going through all of them. They're pretty easy to do. It just shows you how you can just position things real easy now. This is fantastic. That's basically all this talk is, though. So, all right, what the fuck is Flex Basis? I kind of went into it. So, it's what the container is going to see as the actual size of each of the items, and then it'll base how much it needs to flex or not flex or whatever based on that. It has to do with positioning. So if you tell it it's got a flex basis of 10% and the shrink is 0 and the grow is 0, it's going to make that item take up 1/10 of the parent container, which is handy. So, and by default, if you have it set to auto, it's going to default to whatever box sizing is telling it. So if it's content box, it'll be one thing. If it's border box, it'll be larger. And also, you can also put in unitless items, in which case, if you all have them all set to 1 as a flex basis, what it'll do is it'll just keep them all the same width. So it's just another way of enforcing it. And they're putting more and more unitless things into these new CSS specs, and it's really confusing. So, but once you get the hang of it with Flex, and hopefully it'll help some things in the future. Let's move on. So there's only 2 things of shorthand. There's the one for just Flex, and it lets you, in one fell swoop, define grow, shrink, and basis. So these are all things you define on the children or the Flex items, and I use this one exclusively, mostly because if you don't set one of these, like if you just leave auto off, it just puts auto. If you leave 0 and auto off, all it's doing is flex grow. It sets them to their defaults otherwise. So,
Okay.
and then flex flow, one that I don't use, you put on the parent, and it says whether or not it's going to be row, and it just defines the row in the wrapping, or the direction in the wrapping. So you might say column, wrap, to get wrapping columns. That's exactly what you'd think. I guess I'd use that one, but I like to define the other ones more explicitly because I get things like justify content, align content, align items, all that shit mixed up because items and content mean the same thing to me. So there are some browser shortcomings. Down here I have a link to all the big issues that are out there. It's like a GitHub project that people can submit pull requests to if they find a new bug. And basically, it's just IE 10 and back have issues. You don't have to worry about it for most things. If you use a polyfill, it actually fixes them for IE 10. So, by the way, there's a polyfill.
Yep.
Can I use says you can use it. Here, maybe this will show me. So you can see, you know, IE10's got some bugs. IE9, nope. IE8, nope. But if you use that polyfill, you're good back to IE6. And usage related, like we're good. So, what's this UC browser for Android? Is that the main one that people use? Is that the default Android browser? No, this is the Android browser. I don't know what UC browser for Android is. Whoops. Didn't really mean to do that, but whatever.
UFC browser.
Yeah, just for the
John Cena
fighting. Yeah.
Translates it for you.
Nice. I like that. I got some more resources. This Flexbox in 5 is the most useful thing you could ever do if you wanted to sit down and figure out Flexbox and not listen to my rambling or watch or use my project. And what this lets you do is you can just add items. You can change the child items on this one. You can say, oh, I want you to grow. I don't want you to grow. I wish they would use the terminology. You know, like flexi means flex grow. And just play around with stuff. You can turn wrapping off.
So kind
You
of play
can-
around and kind of figure out how stuff works.
Precisely.
Except that it doesn't work very well because you use the actual things. You're not really learning anything. You're just
Exactly.
interacting.
You should just build something with Flex and just dive right in because it's not that bad. It really is not that bad. And that's it. Yay, Flexbox.
Thanks, John, man.
Thanks.
You have a link in there to the polyfill?
Yeah.
Yes, I got it right here. If anybody wants to copy it down right now, you can. Because it's not that long. Actually, I could just send it to folks if they want to.
Well, if it's on the thing, I'll probably just go to your
It's on the
GitHub,
thing.
right?
It's up on GitHub. It's called Flexbox.
But you have this on GitHub.
Yeah. Oh, but it's not a GitHub Pages thing. I think I'm gonna flatten it.
Well, that's okay.
But
I can just
yeah.
download it and
Download it. It's a Laravel project. Make sure you do Composer install because I didn't include the vendor directory because probably shouldn't.
Yeah, it's easy enough. I can do that. Is there a database?
No database. No.
Woohoo!
Oh yeah, it's just all views. I just used it for all I used it for was so I could have the routing these intelligent URLs, and then I could generate the previous and next buttons without having to
Yeah.
do something stupid.
You don't have like step 1 HTML, step 2 HTML.
I do have step 1 blade stuff in there. Yeah, that part is annoying, and I wish I had done it that way. But
Wow.
well, and I have like a master template and header, footer, and blah, and I injecting some of these. Yeah, then you can make it a single page app, real easy. I'm injecting things like these align items. You know.
It's quite flexible.
Oh,
You could.
wow.
You could.
Zing.
You should die.
Right. I should.
I don't know.